I was reading this report. It was from a old audit back in 2021. The objective was to figure out how they can reduce corrosion hours or see how effective corrosion prevention is for certain programs. And the article went on saying that the organization they did the survey on did so horribly with their corrosion prevention that not only were they still having corrosion damage, they found out that this said organization was, let's say, pencil whipping those inspections. And
pencil whipping.
What?
That's not a thing. Come
Say
on,
it ain't
Zig.
so.
Don't lie. Don't lie to the listeners.
What? No. and to make matters even more fun is the environment they were operating in is a very humid, salt, water heavy environment, right? Or moisture heavy environment. So that just breeds corrosion. It's about the same as an infection would. For the unversed or the people who are just barely coming into aviation or have a minimal understanding about metals, corrosion is probably like one of the most ongoing battles you will ever have in anything aviation.
Especially if you work in a salty air environment.
Yes. I can't remember who we were talking to. It was someone on Instagram where they were talking about like how in depth and how intense coastline inspections are for helicopters. And that struck a nerve in my head because I remember just even working near the water. All your inspections, whatever their scheduled time is, now you just cut those in half. So instead of say like 14-day inspections, now they're 7. Or if they're 50-hour inspections, now they're 25. And it doesn't sound like much, but if you considering how much you're flying and how much you're doing stuff, they'll eat up those hours quick. Especially like say if you're in a heavy lift aircraft environment, 25 hours is like no big deal to them. They'll bounce from one end of the country to the next and hit 25 hours, no problem. And then by the time they get down, now they're down for the next 3 to 5 days.
Yeah, I just think about all the big airliners that spend their days crossing the Pacific, right?
Yes.
Heading out of LAX, SFO, or Seattle, or even Vancouver, and bebopping across to Hawaii or beyond over to Philippines or Japan or Korea. And they'll do that. They'll hop over there 16 hours and turn around and hop back. So you can see in the span of 2 days of flying, 2.5 days of flying, you fit your 25 hours. I mean, and that's those are crucial times for airlines, right? Hey, if the bird's not in the air, it's not making money. It's just an overgrown paperweight.
Yes.
So to tie back in with what Six was saying about pencil whipping, you can see why people might pencil whip. Okay, we have to do this every 25 hours. Holy cow. But yet you've got ops breathing down your neck. When am I getting my bird back? We're costing too much money on this, but it's a requirement to do, right? For the safe operation, the continued safe operation of the aircraft. So with all those added pressures, and all of us have experienced it, I think, faster for less, do more with less. You're out there with alcohol, Scotch Brite, popsicle sticks and everything, just scraping away and sanding off, and then, alodining bare metal as sloppily and as fast as you can just to get that thing out of the hangar and back onto the ramp.
Right.
It's so you can see why it's appetizing for people to just we just did this 2.5 days ago. How bad is it really? Sign that off and kick it out the door. Right.
Or sometimes they'll fall back and say like, well, they do a once over inspection, or like we'll catch it on the once over inspection before it actually flies out. Right. Which, yeah. But let's think about it. Like if you're just doing a once over, you're kind of not looking as hard. I mean, you will have those individuals who say like, no, man, like I look at that thing as or my once over is just as in depth as my deep dive or something like that. True. I mean, that may be your mindset. Like, and I appreciate that if someone actually has that kind of pattern where they can just look at aircraft like, okay, this is how I'm going to zigzag through this aircraft to make sure I hit all my inspection points. It happens. You kind of develop that over time. Like, this is how I'm going to split the aircraft apart to do what's necessary. But when it's a deep dive, you have anywhere from a day to a couple of days to do this inspection versus like, say, a pre-flight or a once over. You got like maybe a 30-minute turnaround to get this in and out the door for the next flight. I don't know how fast people are, but 30 minutes is not a long time at all for you to do an inspection that says this is conditionally safe to fly and not miss a single thing, right? Or they'll have like limits, right? Like, it's fine, right? Or
or it's broken up into phases. Okay, at this 25-hour mark, you're looking at nose and main landing gear, which, you know, oh my gosh, that's just so much in and of itself. Anybody who spent time in the gear well of a larger plane knows that it's more than just the gear, you know, the struts and the axles. You're looking at wheels. You're looking at all the exposed fuel and hydro lines that run across the interior of those bays. And for those of you who don't know, imagine taking just spaghetti and throwing it on the ground, and however it lays, that's kind of what it looks like in there. It's just lines running everywhere.
Just a glop of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's great that you mentioned that, especially of all those bare parts. That it kind of like goes into like a corrosion tip for us. If it shines at all, it's gonna corrode. Period. Right.
If it shines at all and isn't the strut, it's gonna
corrode. Right.
You better halidine it.
Like, but Six, what about it? What if it's shiny paint? Like, you be surprised. You will be surprised. And
well, that's very interesting you bring that up, because I have seen before. I think I was down in Houston working a jet, and I was looking at this paint, and I was like, it was an older aircraft, so the paint was all kind of rough on it.
Yeah.
But corrosion had started developing in the pores of the paint. Like, it had seeped down through the pores to the bare metal and then had corroded itself back out of that.
Eesh.
I was like, it's like, you know, how moss grows on something. It was kind of like that. You're like, how the heck, how did this even get here? You know?
Right. No. And goes to say, right, if it shines, it can corrode. And especially if it's exposed, like if it's exposed to the elements, like it has a high chance of getting water intrusion or some kind of fluid intrusion, it's going to corrode. Especially if they're dissimilar metals, like metals that just naturally act when they're next to each other. We can go into the science of that, but I mean, I'm not going to get all nerdy with it, but more or less, like if they're dissimilar metals, like they're prone to react to each other, and there's a way for moisture to seep in there, any kind of moisture, it's going to corrode, like guaranteed. And then there you are with your little wire toothbrush and a can of Corrosion X or Ardrox, scrubbing away and spraying at it just to keep the rust from going.
I mean, literal hundreds of hours, I think we've all spent just going over the same surface even.
Yep. And I think that's where the pencil whipping kind of happens, because whenever like whoever is in charge of the maintenance allocation hours, they'll say, hey, we need to allocate this much time to corrosion treatment and corrosion prevention, right? And sometimes these hours are like outrageous. Like, we need to have 800 corrosion prevention hours this month. I'm like, how the fuck are we going to do that, right? So you'll see like one guy or a couple guys with their scrubbing brushes and their can of Ardrox or Corrosion X, and just go on to like, they're pretty much like scraping off the film that they laid up and spraying it back on again just to account for those hours, right? And then they themselves will say like, well, we'll catch this on the next condition inspection of the aircraft or whatever the case may be. And that kind of leads into the more of the pencil whipping of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to be up in there with a tub of alcohol and just soaking everything.
Yep.
And then scrubbing and scrubbing and scrubbing and all that. But, there's limits to everything, right? Because there's some stuff, I think we've all seen the corrosion. You get up in there and you're like, look, so much is corroded, especially on the older birds. And you're like, I don't know. Like, let's face it, for this to be done right, it needs to be sent back to OEM, stripped, and then re-primed and painted.
Right.
Like, that's just it, like the Mandalorian, this is the way. But obviously not cost effective to an operator to do that once a year. So that's why they have these limits and individual inspections to try to postpone it to maybe every 5 years or something like that. If it's the B-2 bomber, it comes, is it once a year, 6, that thing gets stripped? No, once a year they bring one of them back, and it spends a whole year getting gutted, stripped and gutted down to the bare frame. Everything inspected, tested, looked at, re-gutted, and then built back up. But it takes an entire year for that to happen.
That's a big plane too, by the way, man. I mean, and there's some secret squirrel stuff in there too, so I'm assuring that's factored into the mix. But yeah, based on the Air Force's inspection scheme of it, I want to say at least a year, somewhere at least a year. And it all depends on how much it's flying too. But yeah, and then like we were saying with, like, say if it's going through coastlines or if it's going through the Pacific Ocean, that's a whole lot of moisture that thing's just gonna suck right up and just wreak havoc on all the bare parts or the non protected parts for it to corrode. And you'll be amazed as how much moisture can just seep into places. I remember like doing inspections on certain aircraft. I'm like, how the hell is this rusting? Like, it's not in it's paneled up. It's in an enclosed space, but it's corroding. Like, how the hell did this happen? and it's just
that humidity is no joke.
Yeah. And especially in certain areas, like say like in Hawaii or Malaysia, it's so humid there that the humidity will actually fuck with your gauges, right? It will start messing up with how your aircraft reads how high it's going and how fast it's going. So that corrosion stuff, it really plays a factor, especially in that prevention piece. Again, like if it shines in any way, shape, or form, it can and will corrode. And that's another thing you got to kind of factor in when you're going into high moisture environments or high humidity environments is what is your maintenance schedule going to look like once you're there? And if you don't have a plan for that, you might want to start. And for the most cases, OEMs have some kind of inspection for that, like half your inspections times or split it up into steps and phases, or you have to use these certain tools, or you have to use these certain parts for these areas, or certain corrosion preventatives like Corrosion X or Ardrox, or some type of corrosion preventative film or paint, stuff like that.
Cosmoline, if it's for the engines.
Yes, that's it. I was like, oh, what's that other one? No, like it was at the tip of my head. I just couldn't figure it out. But those are definitely things you personally need to factor in, especially for corrosion. And if you're going to place high humidity areas like, say, Hawaii or Malaysia or anywhere in the Pacific where you're just surrounded by water, it's going to be a fun time for you. It really is.
Well, so you've spent a lot of time in your life in, let's just face it, hot, humid, salty environments. What was some of the worst corrosion you've experienced, in that time? I mean, I have to lean on you because I grew up in a place where, I mean, it was humid and we had moisture and they put salt on the roads. So the vehicle suffered, but I don't know how much the aircraft suffered. Probably a decent amount, I imagine. Well, you know what? They would spray all that. I don't know how corrosive it is either, but like a glycol, like the anti-icing stuff. Mm-hmm. I don't know how corrosive that is anymore. I'm sure they've changed the formula around.
Right.
So it's not as bad.
So the most significant corrosion that I've seen was actually inside the engine itself. Like a lot of moisture seeped into the engine as it's turning, and for whatever reason or another, the individuals that were taking care of this aircraft didn't perform like a desalinization rinse. If you're working in areas like this, like there has to be some kind of way to flush the engine with fresh demineralized water, so it kind of flushes out whatever hanging salt that it sucked in from its flight time. And the funny part is like some of these desalinization kits, they look like super soaker packs. You know what I mean? Like those old 90s toys where kids carry like a backpack and it has a gun at the end of it. Mm-hmm. It looks just like that, man. I swear it's the funniest shit ever. And we used to call it the Ghostbuster packs because it looked exactly like that. And here's a dude just with a little squirt gun with a backpack, pretty much like a camel bag with a squirt gun at the end of it, just spraying demineralized water into the engine as it's turning. But one of the worst ones I've seen was in the engine, and it corroded so much that the compressor blades were starting to chip off because of corrosion. And
because it was scraping the outer casing.
Yeah, so like a lot of salt buildup was coming in. It started to rust, and then to top on motion, friction, and heat, and the heat from the engine itself. Now you're getting heat-induced corrosion. Now you're getting all those other different forms like pitting and stuff like that, just like eating away at these blades. Luckily, we caught it in time to do something about it, like replace the engine and not have catastrophic failure. But we first started noticing that it was having this issue because it started having a drop in power. Like it wasn't providing enough air to get a solid combustion. And we're like, why is this having such problems? We did some preventative measures, like do a full engine wash with aircraft soap or engine soap, and it was fine for a little bit, but then it still had the same problem. And then once we did the bore scope, we found out that the blades inside the engine were actually starting to corrode through. Like, okay, time to move on. I've also seen like aluminum corrode in those environments. Like pitting, does little it looks kind of like talc powder or chalk almost when aluminum starts to corrode. And then cars, especially, or anything that's like not cars but GSC, the chassis of them will start to corrode through. And you can kind of sort of feel it. You'll have like this extra bounce to it. I'm like, what the hell's going on with this thing? And you look under the chassis, and it's completely orange from all the rust.
Oh my! Yeah,
it gets bad, especially in those areas. Like I'm saying, like if moisture can find its way in, it's gonna corrode. And example was the engine. Luckily, we didn't find anything else crazy. But that's another reason why you got to take this stuff serious with the corrosion preventative compounds that you use, whether it be Corrosion X, Ardrox, or whatever the case may be, or paint, and using the right paint too. Because I've seen some people where they just kind of scrub the rust a little bit and then they paint over it, which it's just gonna peel off because you didn't prep it right. But whatever gets the plane up and going.
I may or may not have painted over some corroded hardware that I found and sanded off the corrosion, and then used nail polish of a similar color to paint over it in times of need on the road.
I'm actually picturing that with like nail polish, like the brush that comes with the nail polish kit.
That's exactly what I mean. My toolbox had 3 little slots, and I had red paint, blue, or 4 slots. I had white, red, blue, and black. And and I got to tell you, as my lead at the time said, some paint's better than no paint. So, okay.
This is true. Is it one of those acrylic ones, so it has some kind of protection?
Actually, yeah, it did. I was like, like a hardener in here.
Huh. Well, there we go. If it absolutely has to fly, like has to, a little bit is okay.
Yeah, I would only recommend it for like, if you're doing every screw on a panel, maybe. maybe not. But if it's one on there and it's a non-stress panel, you're probably safe.
Yeah. It's like, get fancy with it, man. You know, get fancy.
Me sitting out there doing the nails of the plane.
I picture that. You know, you gotta talk to it like you're at a nail salon too, right? Like,
yeah. So how you doing?
How you doing? Why you don't have girlfriend? Yeah. It's because, or why you don't have no boyfriend? This is why. Don't worry, I help you. $5 more.
Angela Johnson sketch. Oh
yeah.
God, yeah. But doing that with an aircraft.
That would be hilarious.
Additionally, we've all cut ourselves while working. Piece of safety wire, zip tie, cotter pin, you name it, and you get blood on those metal surfaces. You got to get that off pretty quick. Obviously, pat yourself up, but don't forget to go back and wipe off that blood. Maybe you realize it, maybe you don't, but blood is super corrosive. Why? You got iron in your blood, so
yes,
it'll do some damage.
Yes. Oh, and certain aircraft, whatever their parts are made of, they're super prone to corrosion. Like I forget what metal it is or what kind of metallic coating it is, but it's very sensitive to the oils on your hands. So like if you were to touch it, like just barehanded, within a certain period of time, it's gonna have like corrosion in the shape of your hand. So it might even go as far as like having parts of your fingerprints on it, but it's that sensitive. So be mindful what you're touching and what causes them to corrode too. I don't see why you would be touching parts like that barehanded. I'm pretty sure it's pretty obvious that certain things like that will corrode like that, but just thought I'd make that mention too. Because I remember it was actually a mast for a helicopter. There's a part of the mast that goes into the transmission itself. It's like a very shiny piece of metal, and it's like even cautions all over the place. It says, "Do not touch this with your bare hands." And so of course, there's always gonna be that one new kid is like, "Why can't I touch it?" Like, well, because you'll corrode a impression of your handprint on that metal. I wonder if that really works. I'm the dumb kid that would think that, But yeah, with corrosion and stuff, you don't want to play with it, and especially if you're in environments like, say, seafaring areas or water heavy area or moisture heavy areas. That stuff is nasty. It'll fuck you up. Or it'll make things so much worse if you just did it right the first time.
Yeah, but as we all know, the schedule and everything being driven. Of course, you head out to some of those remote islands there. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, we got an inspection due. Chances of you having what you need on that island to properly address the corrosion is going to be slim to none, I bet. Very slim, yes. And then also you got to kind of factor in, like, since we're talking about islands, like certain island countries, they have very strict environmental rules, right? Like for Hawaii, for instance, like you can't, if it's not water, you can't dump it on the ground, period, right? Or if it's fuel, it has to be one of those clean burning ones where like it has to consume its own waste or something like that. Yeah, we call them EPA cans, but yeah, basically puts it into a little catch can, and then when you go to start the next time, it'll use some bleed pressure and push that waste fuel from the last shutdown into the fuel used for ignition on the next one. Right. Yep. So you got to be very considerate about that too. It's like depending on which if you're transitioning to islands, that factors into. Now, if it's just like some random rock in the middle of nowhere, I mean, chances are if you have to land there or pass through there, it's going to be pretty rough. What do you know about random rocks in the middle of nowhere? They're rocks and they're random. And they're in the middle of nowhere. I've seen movies, man. What's that one TV show? Lost, that's it. Yeah. Random island with absolutely nobody in it, but you're in like this Bermuda Triangle of looped events. Oh man, good times. But yeah. I would have to say corrosion I mean, that's typically an airframer's. Well, if you're a mechanic, I mean, everybody's going to do everything, but typically it'll be your airframe specialties that are going to come out and evaluate and take care of. I guess maybe that's more of if you're in the military unit.
Yeah, this kind of just popped in my head with the electronics of stuff because it generates its own moisture, right? Or I wouldn't say it generates moisture, but like moisture is very prone to happen in those areas, especially like with connector plugs or high heat producing components. Those are very prone to corrosion, and if you're not familiar with how that equipment works, it will get fucked up real fast. And then likewise with like how it can start messing with your gauges, depending on what that component is, can start messing up with a lot more sensitive systems that would probably take you the better part of a couple of days to get that troubleshot correctly. So that's another thing too. And that can be a whole slew of layers itself is with electronics, like especially if they're high heat producing, like they have to suck in a lot of air and they produce a lot of heat. They will generate, well, I won't say generate, but moisture is very prone in those areas. Like say in the pitot-static area, the static ports, a lot of moisture passes through the area, a lot of condensation passes there, so it's very prone to rust or corrosion. I'm sorry, not just rust. The connector plugs that plug into electronics or components, they're very prone to rust too. And being familiar with how to treat them is especially a thing. So it's not just the fasteners or the struts or like exposed parts. Like it's also areas that that pretty much draw moisture, or they're very prone to have moisture accumulate in them. And if you're unfamiliar with how to treat these corrosions, you could actually damage these parts in the process of trying to figure out how to fix it or remove the corrosion. MVP said this earlier through the episode, like sometimes things are within limits, and the severity of the corrosion kind of depends on what the part is or where it's at. But generally, if it's like a bright orange, that's kind of like a clear sign, like, yeah, we should probably do something about this.
Yeah, like I said, your manual is going to have all sorts of type of limits, and you're going to have acceptable, and then you're going to have areas that it's just absolute zero.
Yes. And yeah, I mean, there's so many things you can go about it, and it's really just based on like your ability to spot it, your ability to know, to recognize it, what kind of corrosion it is, because there's very different types, and how to best treat it. And that, as MVP said, like the best way to figure that out is to just consult your manuals. Always default to the manuals, and if it's very vague, and then find somebody who is seasoned enough to help you out with this, be it another mechanic, your boss, an engineer, somebody's gonna know some ins and outs about how to treat that.
But let's face it, if you're on the line and you're turning and burning and you got a couple cotter pins that are slightly rusty, or a screw head, or small surface on an angle bracket or something like that, yeah, you're going to put lipstick on a pig at that point.
Yes.
Controls not pulling that one off the line, not off of a revenue flight to replace one screw and a cotter pin. It's just not going to happen.
That's very true.
They're going to say that's common stock. You got 30 minutes on this turnaround while we're fueling, deplaning and replaning to get those swapped out. So, pitter patter.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. Again, a lot of this stuff is based on schedule, as MVP said. Like when you're turning and burning, depending on the frequency of your flights, how long they are, and how much money is being made off of it, decisions will be made, right? And again, but it all has to be within limits to a certain degree, right? We all recognize that. Yeah. Anything else to add on corrosion or anything else, MVP?
No, I think we've pretty much kind of covered it all. I mean, we could maybe go in depth a little bit on some, the corrosion types, right? Because some people might not know what all types. All they think of is the rust they had on their car.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if people are interested in that or not.
Yeah, let us know. Like, do you guys want to know what kind of corrosions there are? What areas are most prone to certain types? I think for corrosion, for that type of awareness, it's very good to like show you, right? Because sometimes you have ones that look very close together, but they're slightly different. Or one is signs of another one, if that makes any sort of sense. So, but let us know. Like, do you want us to deep dive more into what types of corrosion there are and what areas each type is most prone to be at?
Yeah, I mean, there's stress corrosion cracking, intergranular, metal, crevice, right? For when you get like overlapping of metals, but maybe the paint or sealant's worn out. So, moisture and such and dirt get in there and then it starts eating itself from the inside out. And then, obviously pitting.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, pitting's not fun, especially on metals where they don't show signs of it until it's like well past the limit, well within the concern limit. Like,
well, what's crazy is like you might not notice and you're looking at it because it's still got paint on it, and there was a small crack in the paint and it started, like I said, eating itself from the inside of the paint, the shell of the paint, and you're like, that paint's all, well, it's pitty, it's pitted looking.
Yep.
And then you scrape it off and you're like, oh my gosh, there's a significant amount of material missing from the metal underneath.
Right. Or like you scrape it off and parts of the metal comes off, like, ooh.
Oh boy, yeah.
This is not good.
Not good.
Ooh. And especially, and usually with ones that do pit, it kind of makes like this powdery substance, and it's probably stuff you shouldn't be breathing in. So like, yeah.
Oh yeah, nobody should be breathing in rust dust.
Like, moving away from this now. Exit stage right. But most definitely let us know. Like, let us know what kind of corrosion, or if you want us to expand a little bit more on the types, where they're prone to, what they look like, what certain metals are prone to receive certain types of corrosion. Because it's not, as MVP said, it's not just rust. There's a whole slew of them, and some you won't even realize until it's well past the point of concern. It's now an issue. So, by all means, let us know. Hit us up on the social medias. Hit us up on our website. Send us an email. Patrons, hit us up on Discord. That's probably like the best way to get a hold of us, is to be a patron and join our Discord. Speaking of which, with Patreon, we received a new patron. He's on one of the more top tiers. Mr. Kilman is a new patron. Thank you for your patronage and your support. As for all our patrons,
and your long hair, your long voluptuous red hair.
Voluptuous red hair. And to all our patrons, thank you for your support, your patronage. All our listeners out there, wherever you are in the world, we appreciate you all for listening. We appreciate you all for supporting and tuning into us, providing us feedback, and just making this stuff fun, because without all of you, this stuff wouldn't be happening, or wouldn't be as fun as it is. We released an episode about our behind the scenes of how this whole mess came about, and we never saw ourselves getting this far, and it would never have happened without each and every single one of you. So thank you all for that. And for our new patron, Mr. Kilman, thank you again. And again, the best way to get a hold of us, either to our website, to our emails, or be a patron and join us on Discord. That is the absolute best way to see us. We look forward to hearing from all of you, interacting with you, and maybe someday we'll be at live events to see you all at some point.
Yeah, it'd be the ultimate goal.
That would be.
We'll see where it takes us.
We're one step at a time. We're getting there. We're the slow moving tug, Just takes a while. We're cold starting our way through the line,
We're a diesel we're a diesel in Alaska in February.
So when there's no glow plug warmers either, like just gotta kind of just motor on through it to see which one gives out first, the gas flooding or the car or the battery dying.
Yes.
Damn it. On that note, thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you all next time.
Bye, everybody.
We would like to take this time to thank our patrons for supporting our show and allowing us to make episodes, maintain our gear, and create merch for all of our listeners. With special thanks to Erica Lamont, Chris Hawkins, Eric Shaw, Dan Schubert, Ryan Frushauer, Kyle Keir, Mike Sherwood, Caleb Stockhill, and Jennifer Brofer. Thank you all so much for your support and patronage. If you like our show, please support us on Patreon. You'll receive awesome perks like access to our private Discord, discounts and early access to our merch, first glimpse of our comics and other projects, and so much more. You can further support us and show off your prowess as an aircraft specialist by visiting our shop at cancelformaintenance.com. If you like classy or rugged watches, visit our affiliate Rockwell Time at rockwelltime.com. Use the code CX4MX to save 10% off your total order. If you have suggestions for the show or you'd like to be a guest on the show, send us a line on our contact us section at cancelformaintenance.com, and we'll do what we can to get both your ideas and yourself on the show. Please support us on social media like Facebook at Cancel for Maintenance, Instagram at CANX for Maintenance Podcast, or Twitter at CXMX Podcast. Please check out our new comic series on the Tapas app. Like, share, subscribe, and comment on our comics. Let us know what you think. Thank you all so much for your support and listenership, and we will catch you all next time.